Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland is back in Washington for more NAFTA talks, and it is a critical time after last Friday's deadline passed with no new agreement. For more, I want to bring in Bruce Heyman. He is former U.S. ambassador to Canada. He joins me on the line today from Aspen, Colorado. And Bruce, I can tell you we're awaiting the minister. She's expected to come out and give us an update shortly, so we may have to cut our interview short. But I want to ask you about the three sticking points that seem to be on the table right now: dairy supply, cultural appropriation, and Chapter 19 dispute resolution. Where do you see Canada being able to compromise? Because you know the U.S. is not going to put a new deal on the table without some compromise.
So the challenge, I think, from the U.S. perspective is they don't seem to have compromise in their heart. And so if these are bright lines for the U.S., then the Prime Minister has also made it very clear that these are bright lines for Canada. And that's where you just look at each other from across the table. But if you can make progress finding middle ground, I think in dairy, for example, there was greater access provided in TPP. And so that there is, I think, an inclination to give a bit more access without getting rid of supply management. The second is dispute resolution on Chapter 19. That's a bit more difficult to find a middle ground. I think that it should be very clear to everyone, and it should not impact the U.S. position to continue to have this, this arbitration body that exists between our two countries when we have a disagreement. The cultural side is something that I think a lot of Americans may have a difficult time understanding, but for me, after spending 3 years in the country, I totally get the cultural issues that you're facing. And so this is an important issue for the Prime Minister, and he's made it very clear that that's a no-go zone. So, there's so many things that to be worked on that we can enhance our trading relationship. These seem to be, more political than they do actual, because I do not believe either the cultural side or the dispute resolution or even the dairy that the U.S. would significantly increase trade with Canada as a result of any of those issues. And so I think that they're finding positions on both sides of the border that are political, that are become irritants, which raises the last point I'd like to make, and that is the question of whether the president actually ever really wants a NAFTA deal. Is he throwing these things down to knowing that Canada is a difficult place and so that he doesn't get a deal? We've seen leaks, we've seen tweets, we've seen comments from the president that lead me to believe that if he wants a deal, he's not demonstrating this in any way. And I'm just hopeful the negotiators are operating different than the language coming out of the White House.
Well, such great insight, and I wish we had a bit more time, but I want to push back only on that statement that maybe that's Trump being the bad cop and being Donald Trump and allowing, making it seem like he can walk away, making it seem like he can rip up NAFTA. Meanwhile, his mandarins, the guys behind the scene, the men and women behind the scene, are doing the work in the room. As you mentioned, they're literally sitting across the table from each other, trying to give something on each side so that everybody has a win-win, so that Trump can say, well, I held firm and I got this and it's great, and that Trudeau doesn't leave with egg on his face or upsetting an entire, province of dairy farmers. Somewhere there has to be agreement, Bruce, does there not? Or can this literally be left on the table and everybody walks away?
So you're speaking in rationality. Everything you said is completely rational. And everything that is going on from the seat in the Oval Office seems to me completely irrational, especially when it comes to the U.S.-Canada relationship. And so I'm hopeful. And look, everybody I've talked to, economically, politically, emotionally, the U.S.-Canada relationship is deeply important to Americans. And we saw it over the last few days when we saw labor and business come together in agreement, where I'll tell you, to see the AFL-CIO and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce agree on anything is a big day. And we're seeing leaders in the House and the Senate, both Democrats and Republicans, saying it. But I've not seen rationality coming out of the president. And if anything is true in this book with regard to his demand to destroy NAFTA, is not rational at all. So he may be making decisions completely either emotionally for himself or politically he believes his base would be energized by the fact that he got rid of NAFTA. I think a deal could have been done in 2017, early 18. Now we're mid to getting to late 18. And he's had a lot of opportunities to have a win-win-win. And I just keep scratching my head as to why we're not doing it. And it may very well be that he doesn't want it.
Bruce Heyman is the former U.S. ambassador to Canada. Thank you for coming on, as always, Bruce. We do appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.